My name is Richard Rick Miller. I'm 53 years old, and for most of my life, I believe that if I put my son first every single time, it would eventually mean something. I didn't know it then, but one quiet afternoon would show me exactly where I ranked in his world. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I became a dad at 28, way earlier than I ever planned. His mom, Laura, and I were young, broke, and figuring things out as we went. When she left 5 years later, it wasn't some dramatic blow-up. She just said she needed more from life than late shifts, overdue bills, and a husband who was always tired. She hugged our son, Evan, packed her car, and drove out of Ohio without much else to say. After that, it was just me and a 5-year-old boy with too many questions and not enough answers. I worked construction during the day and stocked shelves at night. I missed birthdays, school plays, and weekends with friends. I told myself it was temporary. I told Evan it was all for him, and for the most part, he believed me. I never dated seriously again. Every dollar went toward rent, groceries, school clothes, or his little league fees. When other dads were upgrading trucks or taking trips, I was clipping coupons and saying no to myself without thinking twice. Evan grew up fast. He was smart, confident, and always a little distant. Teachers said he was focused. Coaches said he had leadership. I said yes to everything he asked for, even when I shouldn't have. New cleats? Sure. Private tutoring? We'll make it work. College out of state? I sold my old Harley without telling anyone. I figured sacrifices were just part of the deal. That's what dads did, right? That night changed everything, or at least started to. Evan was 25 then, freshly graduated, living in Chicago with a decent job in marketing. We talked maybe once every couple of weeks, short calls, quick updates. He was always busy, always running somewhere. I didn't push. I never wanted to be that dad who hovered or guilt-tripped. I figured he'd come around when life slowed down. I didn't know it then, but that mindset was already costing me more than I realized. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting in my truck outside a job site. Evan sounded rushed. He didn't ask how I was, didn't ask about work. He just said, "Dad, I need a favor." I remember gripping the steering wheel, feeling that familiar knot in my chest. "What's up, buddy?" I said. He explained that he and his girlfriend were looking at an apartment downtown. Nice place. Good location. Problem was, his credit wasn't strong enough yet, and they needed a co-signer. "It's no big deal," he said quickly. "Just a formality. Everyone does it." I hesitated. I wasn't rich. I owned my small house, had some savings, but nothing fancy. One missed payment could wreck me. I tried explaining that. Evan sighed, like I was slowing him down. "Dad, you always worry too much. Nothing's gonna happen." Here's where things got complicated. I asked him why he didn't ask his girlfriend's parents. There was a pause. "They don't feel comfortable," he said, then added, "But you trust me, right?" That question hit harder than it should have. Of course I trusted him. I'd built my whole life around trusting him. So I said I'd think about it. He didn't like that. His tone shifted. Cold. Short. "Okay," he said. "Just let me know." Kinda need an answer fast. After we hung up, I sat there longer than I should have. I stared at the dashboard and felt something I hadn't felt in years' doubt. Not about him, but about me. About whether all those years of putting him first had quietly taught him that my role was just to say yes. I went home that night and opened a beer I didn't really want. I thought about the times I'd skipped my own needs. The promotions I turned down because they meant travel. The friends I drifted away from. I told myself it was worth it. But for the first time, I wondered if I'd accidentally taught my son that I'd always come last. And that was only the beginning. If you were in my place, what would you have done? The next morning, I woke up with that same tight feeling in my chest, like something unfinished was hanging over me. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the wall where Evan's graduation photo still hung. Him in that cap and gown, smiling like the world was wide open. I remembered how proud I felt that day. I also remembered how he barely hugged me before rushing off with his friends. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up, they move on. That's how it's supposed to go. I went to work, but my head wasn't in it. Every nail I hammered felt heavier than it should have. During lunch, I ran the numbers again in my head. Mortgage, utilities, savings, retirement that didn't look as solid as I liked to admit. Co-signing that lease wouldn't just be a signature. It'd be a risk I'd carry alone. Still, part of me felt guilty even thinking that way. I was his dad. Wasn't this what I was supposed to do? That afternoon, Evan texted me. Just one line. Any update? No, hey, Dad. No, hope you're good. Just business. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I typed out 3 different replies and deleted them all. Finally, I wrote, I'm still thinking it through. His response came fast. Okay, we're meeting the landlord tomorrow. That was it. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying moments from the past, little things I'd brushed off at the time. Evan canceling plans last minute. Forgetting my birthday 2 years in a row. Asking for money without asking how I was doing. None of it was dramatic. Just small cuts that added up over time. I'd always explained it away. He's busy. He's young. He'll understand later. The next day, I got a call from my sister, Corinne. She's 2 years older than me and has never been shy about saying what she thinks. She asked how I was doing, and for once, I didn't give my usual, I'm fine. I told her about the lease, about the co-signing, about how unsure I felt. She didn't hesitate. Rick, you've given that kid everything, she said. At some point, he's got to stand on his own. I told her she didn't get it, that Evan was different, that this was just one more thing. Corinne sighed. That's what you said the last time. And the time before that, her words stuck with me. I realized I couldn't remember the last time Evan had done something just for me. Not because he had to. Not because it benefited him. Just because he wanted to. That evening, Evan called again. This time, he sounded annoyed. Dad, I need to know, he said. The landlord's pushing. I took a breath. Evan, I'm not saying no, I said slowly. I just need to be sure this won't put me in a bad spot. He laughed. Not a warm laugh. More like disbelief. You're acting like I'm some kind of risk, he said. After everything you've done for me, you think I'd screw you over? That stung. I tried to explain it wasn't about trust. It was about reality. Bills, responsibility. What would happen if something went wrong? He cut me off. You're overthinking it, he said. Honestly, Dad, this shouldn't be that hard. There it was. That sentence. It shouldn't be that hard. Like my life, my worries, my future were inconveniences standing in his way. I felt my patience thinning, something I wasn't used to. I'd always been calm with him, always steady. But something inside me shifted. I need more time, I said. Silence. Then he exhaled sharply. Fine, he said. But if this falls through, that's on you. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room and felt a mix of anger and sadness I didn't know what to do with. I wasn't mad, he asked. I was mad at how easily he dismissed me, how quickly my concerns became obstacles. That night, I started wondering if this wasn't really about the lease at all. Maybe it was about something bigger. About how, somewhere along the way, my role in Avon's life had quietly changed from father to fallback plan. And I didn't know yet what I was going to do about it, but I knew I couldn't ignore that feeling anymore. The following weekend, Evan came home for a short visit. He said it was to talk things through, but it felt more like damage control. He pulled into the driveway in a rental car that probably cost more per day than my first apartment did per month. I watched him step out, sunglasses on, phone glued to his hand, looking more like a stranger than my son. We hugged, quick and awkward. He smelled like expensive cologne. I noticed it right away, and for some reason, it annoyed me. Inside, I offered him a beer. He declined, said he was cutting back. Then he sat at the kitchen table like he used to, except now he leaned back in the chair, confident, almost entitled. "So," he said, finally looking at me, "did you decide?" I told him I wanted to talk face to face, that I didn't like how rushed everything felt. He nodded, but his jaw tightened. "I just don't get why you're making this such a big deal," he said. "It's a lease, not a mortgage." I reminded him that my name would still be on it, that if he missed payments, it would hit me. Hard. He rolled his eyes just slightly, enough for me to notice. "I'm not going to miss payments," he said. "I'm not irresponsible." I didn't say it, but I thought about the credit cards he'd maxed out in college. The loan I quietly paid off, so collectors would stop calling. He didn't remember that. Or maybe he chose not to. Here's where things got heavier. I asked him something I'd never asked before. "Evan," I said, "if the roles were reversed, would you do this for me?" He paused, actually paused. He stared at the table, then shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "That's kind of different." Different. That word hit me harder than his attitude ever had. I asked how it was different. He struggled to answer. Finally, he said, "I'm just starting my life." "You've already lived yours." That sentence sat between us like a brick wall. I realized then how he saw me. Not as a person still figuring things out, still worrying about the future. Just as his dad. A resource. A safety net. Something solid that didn't need much consideration. I told him that wasn't fair. That I hadn't stopped needing stability just because I was older. He sighed again, clearly frustrated. "You're taking this way too personally," he said. "This is just how families help each other." I almost laughed. Almost. Because that wasn't how it felt. It felt one-sided. It felt like help only flowed one way. I asked him when the last time was that he'd helped me. Not financially. Just showed up. Checked in. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it. Girlfriend, probably. "That's not the point," he said eventually. "You're my dad. You're supposed to have my back." I leaned back in my chair, feeling tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. "I always have," I said. "But having your back doesn't mean ignoring my own." That night changed everything, even if it didn't look like it on the surface. Evan stayed the night, barely spoke at dinner, and left early the next morning. No resolution. No agreement. Just tension hanging in the air. After he left, I sat in the quiet house and noticed how empty it felt. Not just because he was gone, but because I realized how much of myself I'd poured into being his father, and how little of myself I'd kept for me. A few days later, I made a decision I'd been avoiding for years. I called a financial advisor. Then I called Karen. I didn't tell Evan yet. I needed to be sure. For the first time, I wasn't asking what my son needed. I was asking what I could actually live with. When Evan texted again, saying the landlord needed an answer by the end of the week, I felt strangely calm. The fear was still there, but it wasn't running the show anymore. Something had shifted inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just clear. I knew that whatever choice I made next would say a lot about who I was going to be for the rest of my life. Not just as a father, but as a man. And that realization carried more weight than any lease ever could. By the time Friday rolled around, I had my answer. It didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. A long talk with the financial advisor who laid out worst-case scenarios without sugarcoating a thing. A quiet dinner alone where I realized I didn't even know what I wanted for myself anymore. and a late-night conversation with Karen where she said something that finally clicked. "Rick," she told me, "being a good father doesn't mean being a doormat." I didn't sleep much that night, but for the first time in a long while, my mind felt settled. When Evan called the next afternoon, I stepped outside onto the porch before answering. The air was warm, the neighborhood quiet. It felt like the right place to have a hard conversation. "Hey," he said, "you got an answer?" "I do," I replied. There was a pause, like he was already bracing himself. I told him I couldn't co-sign the lease. I kept my voice calm. No anger, no lectures, just the truth. That the risk was too much for me. That I had to think about my own future for once. The silence on the other end stretched out longer than before. Then he laughed, sharp and humorless. "Wow," he said. "I didn't think you'd actually say no." That hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted his approval, but because it confirmed something I'd been trying not to see. He really didn't think no was an option. "So that's it," he continued. "You're just going to let this fall apart?" "I'm not letting anything fall apart," I said. "I'm just not putting my name on it." He launched into a list of how this would mess things up. How the apartment was perfect. How the timing mattered. How his girlfriend was already stressed. Every sentence made it clearer that my feelings weren't part of the equation. I told him I understood he was disappointed, that I was sorry it put him in a tough spot. He cut me off. "You know what, Dad?" He snapped. "You've changed." I almost agreed with him. Instead, I asked what he meant. "You used to support me," he said. "No matter what." "I still do," I replied. "Just not at the cost of my own security," he scoffed. Must be nice to suddenly decide that. That comment stuck with me. Suddenly, like I hadn't spent decades choosing him over myself. Like this decision came out of nowhere. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list my sacrifices. I just said, "I hope one day you understand." He didn't respond to that. He just said he had to go. Then the line went dead. The days after that were quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no texts. I kept expecting something. Anger, an apology, anything. But nothing came. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. I checked my phone more than I should have. I replayed the conversation in my head, wondering if I could have said it differently. Softer, kinder. But deep down, I knew the answer wouldn't have changed. About a week later, Karen stopped by. She brought coffee and didn't ask many questions. We sat in the living room, and I told her how strange it felt to finally say no. Like relief mixed with grief. She nodded. "You're grieving the version of your son you thought you had," she said. That hit hard, because she was right. I wasn't just sad about the argument. I was sad about the realization that Evan saw me differently than I saw him. Another week passed before I heard from him. A short text. "We found another place, smaller, more expensive. We'll manage." No acknowledgement of what happened. No emotion. Just information. I replied that I was glad he figured it out. He reacted with a thumbs up. Life went on. Work. Groceries. Weekends that felt longer than they used to. I started doing small things for myself again. Fixing up the backyard. Meeting an old friend for breakfast. Things I'd always put off. It felt strange, almost wrong at first, but also necessary. I still loved my son. That never changed. But something else had changed alongside it. I no longer felt responsible for cushioning every fall. I'd spent 25 years putting him first. For the first time, I was learning what it meant to put myself somewhere on that list too. A few months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Not better, not worse, just different. Evan and I still talked, but the conversations were thinner now. Updates instead of discussions. Facts instead of feelings. He told me about work deadlines, rent hikes, weekend plans. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer solutions unless he asked. That was new for both of us. At first, the distance bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I kept wondering if I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. I replayed old memories, searching for signs I'd missed. Maybe I'd spoiled him. Maybe I'd been too soft. Or maybe I'd done the best I could with what I knew at the time. That last thought took a while to sink in. One afternoon, I ran into Evan's old little league coach at the grocery store. He recognized me right away. We talked for a bit, laughed about how serious Evan used to be on the field. Before we parted, he said something that stuck with me. "You did good with that kid," he said. He always knew someone had his back. I drove home thinking about that. Maybe I had done good. Maybe the problem wasn't that I'd failed as a father. Maybe it was that I'd finally stopped trying to control the outcome. That realization didn't erase the hurt, but it softened it. Evan came home again around Thanksgiving. This time, he stayed for 2 nights. Things were polite, careful. We cooked together, watched football, talked about nothing important. On the second night, after a couple beers, he finally brought it up. "I was pretty mad," he said, staring at the TV, "about the lease." "I know," I replied. He shrugged. "I get it more now. Still don't love it. But I get it." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. I told him I appreciated him saying that. We sat in silence for a bit, the kind that doesn't feel hostile, just unfinished. Before bed, he thanked me for dinner. That small thing meant more than he probably realized. After he left, I thought about how relationships change when boundaries show up. They get uncomfortable, awkward, sometimes colder before they get honest. I didn't regret my decision anymore. I regretted how long it took me to make one. I started therapy shortly after that, something I never thought I'd do. Turns out, spending decades putting someone else first leaves some questions unanswered. Who are you when you're not needed? What do you want when no one's asking? Those weren't easy questions, but they were necessary ones. I learned that love doesn't disappear when you stop overextending. It just changes shape. I could still be Evan's father without being his safety net for every problem. I could care without sacrificing myself. That balance took time to understand, but once I did, it felt like breathing easier after years of holding my breath. Looking back, I don't think Evan meant to hurt me. I think he grew up in a world where my support was constant, unquestioned, automatic. When that changed, it shook him. And it shook me too. But sometimes, the cracks are where the truth shows up. I still worry about him. I probably always will. That's part of being a dad, but I don't feel invisible anymore. I don't feel like my value depends on what I can provide. I'm learning to be more than just someone's backup plan. If there's one thing I've taken from all this, it's this. Love without boundaries turns into expectation. And expectation, unchecked, turns into entitlement. Family should be built on care, not assumption. On respect, not obligation. I spent 25 years putting my son first. I don't regret loving him. I don't regret the sacrifices. But I do regret waiting so long to show myself the same consideration. Sometimes I still wonder how things might have gone if I'd set those boundaries earlier. Would our relationship be stronger now? Or would it have drifted apart sooner? There's no clear answer. Life doesn't give you those. So I'll ask you this, honestly and without judgment. If you were in my place after years of putting your child first, what would you have done?